The Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Now available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Hello and welcome back to the Baggies Podcast. It's episode 22 of the Baggies Podcast here. And of course, we're going to be talking about all things Albion. On today's show, we've got the lineup. We're going to be going through the lineup that we chose against Newcastle United. We're going to be going through the game against Newcastle United. Another loss for the Baggies, a 2-1 loss in this particular occasion. And we're also going to discuss the vital and pivotal question. What is going on at West Bromwich Albion? Is it the board? Is it Bilic? Is it the players? We're going to be exploring all of those ideas and also hearing your thoughts in this episode of the Baggies Podcast. So stick around to the end if you want to hear about all of those things, and make sure you're following us on Twitter if you are new and leaving us a positive review on Apple Podcasts. So you can do that if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. You can leave us a review. Good, bad, whatever. You can just click how many stars you want to give us and do that. So, without further ado, let's get straight into this episode 22 of the Baggies Podcast. The Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Now available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So, as mentioned in the introduction, another loss for West Bromwich Albion. A 2-1 defeat at Newcastle with Dwight Gale, one of our favourite players over the past few years, coming back to haunt us to get the winner for Newcastle. Yeah, we're going to go into more detail with that game in just a second. But let's first talk about the lineup and, what Slaven picked to go out there in this game against Newcastle. We all thought, as suspected, Newcastle were going to have some absentees after, the recent surge in coronavirus cases that have happened at Newcastle. We didn't exactly know who, but we knew that perhaps it might be a weakened side. But Steve Bruce was making it out like it was going to be, under 18s basically playing. But yeah, it wasn't to be the case. It was a fairly strong lineup, perhaps apart from the back four. So the midfield and the strike force was pretty normal. But yeah, a few changes coming in for Newcastle United in that game. Pretty misshapen back line with Kraft, Hayden, Clark. Lewis was probably an assumed pick. He'd have probably played anyway. And then Almiron, Longstaff, Shelvey, Ritchie, Wilson and Joel Linton in the midfield and up front. We made 3 changes for this game. We brought in Robinson, O'Shea and Krovinovic in for this game. Obviously because Pereira is suspended, so Krovinovic had to come in. O'Shea in for Bartley and Robinson in for Grady Diangana, who played against Palace but didn't get on the pitch yesterday against Newcastle United. So there were the changes that we played. Obviously 3-5-2 as we've come to sort of expect from the lads over the past few weeks. Pereira suspended. As we all know, after the red card, it's a violent conduct red card as well, which is annoying because that means he's going to miss the next 3 games, including the one against Man City in midweek and also the one against Aston Villa on the following Saturday. So yeah, there's a few games that Pereira is unfortunately out of. But yes, what can you do with the standard of officiating in this league? On the bench for both teams, Andy Carroll, Daniel Langley, Yedlin, Gale, Murphy, Jeff Hendrick and Matthew Longstaff in for Newcastle on the bench. For Albion, Kipre made a bench appearance, which was a funny sight to see. David Button, Charlie Austin, Diangana, Livermore, Grosicki and Kieran Gibbs. So there we go. Those are the subs and the lineups for West Brom and Newcastle. So yeah, interesting lineups picked by the 2 managers there. Slaven Bilic, made a couple of brave changes really. Dropping Diangana. Yeah, Diangana not really been at the standard that we were expecting this season. I think Diangana perhaps has let Bilic down in a way. I'm not sure whether it's a confidence issue or something like that. But yeah, he's a shadow of his former self on the pitch at the moment. Obviously costing the highest fee this summer. As far as I'm aware, 18 million for Diangana, I think, for him. So yeah, he's sort of let Bilic down in a way. I don't know whether it's a confidence issue, it's a problem with this playing style, I don't know. But yeah, Diangana not putting in the performance, so probably does deserve to be dropped. Yeah, but let's get straight into the game against Newcastle at St James's Park. One in which that was a difficult one to take again. Now, I know we said this last week, and I know I say it virtually, it's becoming nearly every week now, that, yeah, it's a tough one to take yet again. A winnable game, and one that we've gone to lose, like the Crystal Palace one, but perhaps not in such embarrassing fashion, which I suppose we can be grateful for. Yeah, so the game, yeah, a tough one to take, as mentioned. In all, a poor performance, I'd have to say. Yeah, it's something that we have looked like perhaps winning. Well, I'd say there was a spell in the game where we looked relatively on top, but in fact, there was plenty of chances that we could have created, but didn't. In a way, we took quite a while to get a shot on target, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, so the game started, and within 20 seconds we'd conceded. A ball from it was a lofted ball forward. Came to Callum Wilson, who muscled Branislav Ivanovic off the ball, gave it to Joel Linton. Joel Linton passed it to the back post, and Miguel Almiron was there, happy as Larry to do a nice neat little finish into the corner. So obviously it was a simple goal to concede. So we'll start with that goal. We'll unpick that. So firstly, you've got to look at the defending, because the defending was absolutely terrible for that first goal from Miguel Almiron. You've got Phillips playing at left wing back. Matt Phillips. I've seen people arguing on Twitter about Matt Phillips, saying he's a right winger. Why is he playing left wing back? I have to say, Matt Phillips has got the perfect set of attributes to play left wing back. He just doesn't have that sort of fight or desire anymore. He's got perfect attributes. He's strong, he's fast. All he needs to do is learn to bleed and defend. He's just left. He's been drawn to the ball. He's been caught ball watching. He sucked in by the ball. And Miguel Almiron sort of just sat there wide of the 18-yard box, and he's just happily come in and tapped it home. We've got to talk about Branislav Ivanovic, and the captain for the day as well, getting nudged off it by Callum Wilson. I mean, Wilson's a strong lad. Fair enough. He's quite. He's a well-built lad, big and strong. But Ivanovic is big and strong as well. But Ivanovic is a bit of a unit, I have to say. How you're getting nudged off it by Wilson there is pretty poor. And then Phillips to not be marking your man like that. And after 20 seconds, it was our bleeding kickoff as well. It was our kickoff. We pumped it straight forward to them, and they just come down our end and score straight away. It deflates you a bit, doesn't it, as a West Brom fan, and surely a player as well. If you've just, for example, I'm going to just say, Sam Johnston, you haven't even touched the ball and it's in the back of your net. It's harsh, it's harsh on a lot of the players who'd had nothing to do with that. Because you think about somebody like, I don't know, I'd say Grant hasn't been anywhere near as what we've expected from him, but he's just taken a kick off. He's touched the ball once, and it's not fair that the lack of defensive organisation has cost us in the first 20 seconds of the game. At least hold out for a minute or something. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Yeah, so you start with that goal and you think, oh my God, here we go again. We're gonna. Yeah. You saw us go one goal down against Crystal Palace, and we ended up, toweling and ended up conceding 5. So I said, I can see us conceding 5 or 6 here. Not because we're a bad side, but because we just seem to lose the plot when we go 1-0 down. And that doesn't happen to other teams. Other teams are spurred on by the fact they've gone 1-0 down, and that sort of wakes them up. But for us, it just doesn't. We'd end up in like this sort of lull of, what are we doing? Oh God, oh no, we're going to have to work now. Yeah, it just doesn't seem right. But yeah, then the match went on. I'd say Newcastle dominated for that sort of period afterwards. There was plenty of times where Newcastle could have ended up scoring. There were a couple of little elements of glimpses of hope for West Bromwich Albion, but we weren't able to capitalise from them. So we went into the second half. We made 2 substitutions. We brought Karlan Grant off for Charlie Austin and Kieran Gibbs on for Callum Robinson. Now, I liked the Austin substitution. People, I was at the start of the season, I was really like, I think it's time for Austin to go. But he's here now, and he provides a bit of physicality. You saw it when he came on, a bit of backing into players that we don't have when Robinson and Grant are on. Robinson and Grant, they're a bit weak as a strike force. I'm not saying bad players. I mean physically weak. Not particularly strong. they're both very quick, but they both don't offer very much physically. So when that ball's being pumped into the air and you really need somebody to just hold on to it for just a second, they're not really very good at it. But the other thing about them is that they don't tend to make very intelligent runs. I say Grant made a couple in that game, Robinson not so much, but Austin, he was there for a bit of physicality, and he certainly gave that when he came on. I was a bit confused as to why he was on the bench for the first time in ages, and I was actually glad to see it, because a big lad like him, and he's got a bit of a finish on him as well, so I can see why he was bought. And I wouldn't have agreed to taking both Robinson and Grant off. I might have just kept Grant or Robinson on, and then Austin on the other side. And I thought that might have worked a bit better. But Austin came on and he showed a bit of physicality, and that's really good to see. I can't see why he's not perhaps used a bit more often. That performance from me, I know he didn't score, I know he didn't really do a lot, but that surely says to me that you got a player who's gonna come on and do a decent job. He's backing into players. He's causing problems for defenders, because they're like, oh, we've got a unit on now, and we've got somebody quick to deal with if Grant or Robinson was there. Well, there's two completely different styles of strikers. What are we going to do? So I feel that's the best way to go about it in future. Maybe not start Austin, because I don't think he's, but he's shown he's perhaps not got the fitness levels. But yeah, I think that worked quite well when he came on. And another thing I have to note down I suppose I'll go into that after we've explained what happened for the rest of the match. Then we scored substitution. Actually, the ball came over from Matt Phillips. He does well down the left flank actually, and puts in a pretty dangerous cross, and Furlong comes absolutely flying in. He just gambles and he just comes flying in, and I don't think he's it's not a fantastic finish. It looks like a fantastic. He's not really caressed that home. He's just coming, flying in, throwing himself out, and I love that from Furlong. And he's come in and he's flown in and he's put the ball right in that bottom corner, and it's a fantastic goal, which is really good. So yeah, we scored that goal, which took us to 1-1. Then after 69 minutes, Mr. Dwight Gale came on for Jamal Lewis. Yeah, we all had a little feeling, I think, as to what was going to happen. And the ball comes in from Jacob Murphy. Yeah, Jacob Murphy putting the cross in as well. Yeah, probably one of the worst players I've seen play for Albion over the past couple of years. And Gale heads home from close range. Bit of defensive disorganisation, which we'll talk about in a second. And that made it 2-1. And after that, we didn't really get up to much. Didn't really look like scoring, really, for that. But yeah, for that goal, it's just a defensive organisation again. O'Shea gets caught sort of like ball watching in front of Gale. He slipped Ivanovic and O'Shea and just heads home. I mean, it's a really good cross from Murphy, but there was a little effort to close down from, I think it must have been Gibbs, a left back. Yeah, it was a real little effort to close Murphy down. So he's always going to, he is a decent player. He's got the heart of a pea, but he's a fantastic, he's a really pacey player and can do things. He's just got the heart of a pea. When you give him time and space, he's going to put in a decent ball. Yeah, and he's always going to, there's always going to be quality in that Newcastle side. And if you give them time and space, of course they are. And if Dara O'Shea made a bit of a mistake, I'd probably put that down to Ivanovic as well. But O'Shea sort of not jumping at full stretch, like, sort of it goes over his head and he thinks, oh, somebody else will sort that out. And Ivanovic is just nowhere. He's just nowhere to be seen. I think it's time to be dropped for Ivanovic. He did really well in that Burnley game against tough strikers that are, tall and strong, not a lot of pace about them, and he worked well against them. But as soon as he's coming up against any sort of creative flair or pace, he looks all over the shop, and he looks his age, doesn't he? But yeah, fortunately, I think it's about time for a little drop-in for him. Maybe go back to 4 at the back. He's got to try something different at the moment. At the moment, it's not working. It really isn't. But what went wrong yesterday? It was a real lack of urgency for me, which I was trying to mention earlier, but I think I mentioned now. A bit of lack of urgency. Ball's going out of play and people are just sort of sauntering after it. There's no real pace in the play. No game plan as well, I have to say, yesterday. took off your best player with 80 minutes on the clock, the only one who's actually driving you forward in Conor Gallagher, trying to get you up the pitch, and you take him off. So you just lose all your drive in the midfield when you take him out. Fair enough, you bring on Grosicki, like that change, but I don't know why Phillips wasn't got off earlier, because he's little no use up front, isn't he? Apparently he was playing up front in that particular game. But yeah, Conor Gallagher coming off was a stupid decision for me. I think he's got to stay on. He's man of the match yesterday for me. We'll see what you guys have thought about that in a bit. But yeah, Gallagher just driving you forward. You can't really be taking a player of that sort of quality off. It just doesn't make very much sense. When you need a goal, you need somebody to get you forward. Because at the moment, you just got a load of players who are just sort of without aim really. They've got no aim as to what they're trying to do. I feel like they look a bit disorganised at the back. They look a bit disjointed in midfield, and up front they just look absolutely toothless. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be enough desire or urgency from the Baggies at the moment. It's now time to discuss, I'm afraid, the elephant in the room, and that is what is going wrong at West Bromwich Albion. It's blame, as I'm always overseeing a lot of good. Everyone entitled to their own opinions. I see a lot of opinions on Twitter, some of which blame different things. So, firstly, let's start with the board. Where does the blame lie with the board? And you can. There is an element of blame, I think, for all of the three culprits that I've put on this list. So the board, obviously, you can start with the amount of money they've put in, and the amount of money that they've stuck into the club, and that is not very much. I'd say this season their budget was 25-30 million. I think, yeah, that's just not enough. Yeah, fair enough. 10 years ago, we came up with 25 million. If 25, we came up to the Premier League with 25 million. Wow, what a fantastic, budget that would be. You could buy so many good players with that sort of budget, and that's really good, and you could really strengthen your side. This day and age, that'll get you two or three, like it has, really. So yeah, the board can be blamed for the amount of budget. They can be blamed for perhaps their lack of they seem to not really care about the club. They don't seem to have a lot of interest in it. They're clearly trying to get rid of the club, trying to sell it on to somebody else, which I'd like. I'd like somebody to come in and take it on. Somebody with a bit of money, someone with a bit of passion for football. Because these guys in charge of our club, they don't care about the football club. They care about the money that's coming out with it. And they're obviously pocketing some sort of thing, because that promotion to the Premier League is huge, and it does bring a lot of money towards the club. So some of that has obviously been pocketed, and that's ridiculous. Pocketing money for yourself out of this football club, it should be going straight back in. If you want to survive next year, you put money back into the club. He's just going to lose loads of money, because lots of players are going to go. We're going to perhaps end up in a mid-table championship position. But yeah, so that's the board's fault, really. Bilic is the next person on the list. Where does the blame lie with Bilic? And there's a few things. I don't want to say Bilic out. I'm not going to say Bilic out, because I don't think that's the way I feel. I don't think it's the way that Bilic needs to be. He's still on a pretty bad run of form. I'm sure we can all agree with that. That's surely his fault in the Championship. If he couldn't get them going to get promoted on those final few games of the season, and nearly cost us. So perhaps that's his fault. Another thing is that this lack of urgency in the games, that's probably down to him as well. He's not motivating the players correctly. Defensive organisation, a once fantastic fullback in Bilic can't get their defence together, which is not good. So that's probably his fault as well. Perhaps the signings that he has made are his fault, that aren't Premier League level. I mean, perhaps you could have found somebody else that was Premier League level for 18 million. Eze, for example, Eberizi Eze of Crystal Palace went for about 20 million. We signed Dean Garner for 18, which is who's doing the business in the Premier League at the moment. It's Eze. Looks like such an elegant footballer, and showed that against us last week. So perhaps you can blame Bilic for that. You can blame the players. Where do the players? The players lie with their lack of effort, but they know they're not Premier League quality. Surely they've got to know people like Townsend and Furlong, who have, fair enough, have stepped up massively, but unfortunately still not quite good enough. This is the top of their game that they're playing, Furlong and Townsend, or was playing Townsend before he got injured. So it's the top of their game. That's the top of their game that they're playing, and it's still not good enough for the Premier League. That, they surely know in their hearts that they are not good enough for this level, but they are really trying, and I do have to respect that. They are showing a marked improvement, but it's probably not good enough for the Premier League. People like Bartley and even Ivanovic must be thinking, what the hell am I doing here in this Premier League? I'm starting 11 for this Premier League back line, and it's obviously not. They're thinking, wow, how have I got here? People like Grant should be thinking, wow, this is my chance to shine in the Premier League. I showed what I could do with Huddersfield when we were hit when he was there for that short period of time, and at the end of that season they went down. But he's got a chance to shine on the big stage, and he hasn't. Sawyer's probably so pointless having him on the pitch yesterday, just back and side, back and side, back and side. I don't think he looked forward all day, I don't know, maybe the sun was in the other direction and he wanted to keep his eyes out of it, but he didn't look forward all day. But yeah, in my opinion, it's not Bilic's fault, it is the board's fault. He needs backing, but that some of the tactical decisions can be, you'd say they're a bit poor as well. And I'd have to agree with that. So, without further ado, let's hear your guys' opinions on the podcast this week. So let's see what you guys have been thinking. And let's go and have a look what you've been thinking on Twitter. So, the first question I asked you was, yesterday's game in a sentence. Who was your man of the match? Score prediction for City and Villa. Does Bilic need to go? And if so, who comes in for him? Paul Garbutt says, it's the same old story, unfortunately. Felt hard done by. We lost again and have to accept we are just not good enough at this level. I have to agree with Paul there. We were a bit hard done by. I didn't think we were dreadful yesterday, but eventually defensive mistakes are going to cost you. And that was it's the same old story, really. Gallagher was his man of the match. I'd agree with that. He thinks we're going to lose 4-0 to City and 2-0 to Villa. He says, reluctantly, yes, Slaven has to go. But who can replace him and be effective is the question. He hates to say it, but it's got to be Big Sam for Paul. I have to say, somebody like Big Sam would probably do the job, and I don't want to say it, but I think it's the sort of job for Pulis. I'm glad he's in a job, because we might actually probably have him back. But it's his sort of job to organise the defence. I'd prefer Sam to Pulis, obviously, because I think Sam does provide a little bit more in that attacking area than Pulis. But yeah, and Tim says, it was a sloppy performance. He didn't see a man of the match. A 5-0 loss to Man City, he thinks, and a 1-1 draw with Aston Villa. Bilic needs backing and calm heads around him, and the captains in the side need to stand up now. I agree. Actually, one of the things I failed to mention is the lack of leadership in the side. I think Jake Livermore's a great captain, but he wasn't on the pitch and he wasn't there to help the players yesterday. So there's no leadership on that pitch yesterday. So I'm gonna have to agree with Tim on that one. But once again, thank you everybody, Paul and Tim, for getting your thoughts in on this week's podcast. But that brings us to the end, and no announcement from the board so far on the sacking of Bilic. There's been no news on that. Probably they haven't googled the result yet, the owners, so they probably don't know it. They don't know what's happening. So without further ado, that brings us to the end of the show for this week. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next week, where hopefully we'll have something to cheer about. We've got Man City and Aston Villa in the next week before the next podcast, so hopefully we're going to be seeing some wins. Probably not, but we'll see. So without further ado, follow us on Twitter at the Baggies Pod to get involved next week, and I'll see you next time. See you later, Baggies fans. Have a great week.